Good afternoon, everybody. I realize it's a little bit after 2, and many of you probably know we ran into some location scheduling issues and a lot of hiccups, but the show must go on. This is a very important event, so we want to bring it to you anyway. But I feel like there are probably going to be some people coming in late as they go to maybe a wrong location before they make it here. So I appreciate your patience with that. Good afternoon. I'm Christine Watson. I'm the board chair for the Middle Georgia Alliance to End Regional Trafficking. And the board and I want to welcome you here today and to thank you so much for coming out and attending this awareness event to recognize National Human Trafficking Awareness Month, which is this month in January. MG Alert exists to combat trafficking, human trafficking, both locally and globally, through community education like this, through victim advocacy, and through legal advocacy. So a couple of things before we get started. The documentary lasts about 65 minutes, after which we will take a short 10-minute break. You each have a discussion guide, so you see it will roll pretty quickly. There's so many different forms of trafficking, and they'll hit those high points. So it really does cover a lot of ground in that amount of time. So on our short 10-15 minute break would be a good time to visit our photo booth if you haven't already done that. They've got some props back there that will help you if you're on social media, raise awareness about this issue, just some anti-trafficking things. And if you're not, still to get those digital photos out there would be very helpful, whether it's, even to, just use later, who knows what for, and then also to help us show the participation in this event. And we also have some light refreshments in the lobby that you can have during your break, but the university has asked us not to bring food and drinks into the auditorium. I think water's fine, though. I'll make that call. So after the break, we will hear from our great lineup of speakers. That's going to be our Attorney General of Georgia and a victim specialist from Homeland Security Investigations, and then a survivor of child sex trafficking here in America. So we'll get on with the film. And just as an introduction, and as y'all come on in and sit down. We know there was a location issue, so everybody just come on in, feel welcome to do that. Every year, as many as 800,000 men, women, and children are trafficked across international borders. And according to a recent International Labor Organization study, estimating 55% of those that are trafficked are women and girls, and up to 5.5 million are children. And so there have been cases of human trafficking reported in all 50 states. And today, both children and adults in the United States are being exploited and sometimes enslaved. So this is a very good film to uncover that. And according to a report by the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, the most common form of human trafficking at 79% is sexual exploitation. So we'll go ahead and get on with the show. And as people come in, if y'all just want to direct them, that'd be great. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to introduce our first speaker today. We're so honored to have Sam Olens here, our Georgia's 53rd Attorney General, He was elected to his second term on November the 4th. Sam is committed to serving Georgians by defending the U.S. and Georgia constitutions and upholding the rule of law. In 2011, he worked with legislators to strengthen the penalties for sex trafficking, making Georgia's law one of the toughest in the nation. In 2012, he spearheaded the first comprehensive revision of Georgia's sunshine laws in more than a decade. And in 2013, led the effort to stem the epidemic of prescription drug abuse with a law that requires pain management clinics to be licensed and regulated. In 2013, Olens was elected by his peers to chair the southern region of the National Association of Attorneys General, and he currently serves on numerous committees of that association to include substance abuse, human trafficking, law enforcement and prosecutorial relations, elections and financial services, consumer protection. He devotes much of his time assisting various nonprofit organizations.
That's fine.
Okay.
You don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it.
I liked it. It was good, and I appreciate you being here today.
My pleasure.
I don't know whether to show that. So you'll do it yourself?
No, my pleasure.
Okay.
Okay, so it's a pleasure to be here. I've heard that once or twice. I apologize. So it's a pleasure to be here. So I'm the state's lawyer. I represent the executive branch of government. I dabble a little bit with the legislative or judicial branches, but most of our work is with the executive branch of government. So glad to be here. Glad to see so many folks here on this very, very important topic. I got to see probably about 80% of the film that you saw. So clearly you know that while most people think that the problem is abroad and not here, it is here. It's very much here. I use the term sex trafficking, number one, because I think human trafficking is too nice a word to put on it. And number two, if you're really using human trafficking in the pure sense, that would mean that there's the two types, the sex trafficking and the labor trafficking. In Georgia, we generally see about 2 cases a year on labor trafficking. It really is sex trafficking, so let's deal with what it is. So I want to thank Christine and MG Lurk for inviting me. I work a lot with your U.S. Attorney from the Middle District here, Michael Moore. Work a little bit with your DA, David Cook, in this area. But principally in my office, we partner more with the 3 U.S. attorneys in our state from the Northern, Middle, and Southern districts. And we spent a lot of time on sex trafficking. It was an issue that never came up in my campaign 5 years ago. But shortly after the campaign, we went to a program, we meaning attorneys general, that was presented by a group out of DC called Shared Hope. And at the time, they gave us a lot of data, and they compared the state's laws. And at the time, it was clear that there were about 3 states that had good laws, maybe 20 states that had fair laws. Georgia would have been in that pile. And by definition, many, many states that were way in the Stone Age in trying to deal with this issue or in denial. And actually, there were still 2 or 3 states this past year that changed their laws when they got sufficiently embarrassed because they were still in the Stone Age. So it's been something we spent a lot of time on. It's one thing to say it happens in Cambodia, it happens in India or Nepal. It's another thing to say it happens in Macon. And it does. And in fact, I remember when I was, when my kids were younger, they're now 22 and 24, and when we'd be driving to Florida to take them to Orlando, and they'd say, why are all these billboards We Bear All? Or Cafe Erotica? Or the 43 Asian massage parlors? And if there's anyone that literally thinks that all they do every day is massage, we might need to have a little discussion. And frankly, the Bibb County DA has been very, very involved in that area, as has the U.S. Attorney's Office. And that's very, very important because this is something that we should never have permitted in the first place, but for denial in the first place. So this past December, actually December 23, Michael Moore had a case in federal court here where an Arthur Gerald Reed pled guilty to sex trafficking of children, began in 2011. He was caught 2013. Hotel rooms both in Macon, but also going to Tybee near Savannah. And the main way that you would hook up the girls and the adults was this sleazy website called Backpage. Now, first of all, about 85% of the victims are girls, about 15% are guys, so it's not totally girls. And secondly, I'm mindful of what I say because I could get sued, but I'd really have a hard time thinking of something positive to say about Backpage. Many people know Craigslist, but Backpage has been the much bigger problem. They actually were just sold for the second time in the last 5 years to a Dutch company, I believe, which causes bigger problems for us because now that they're owned abroad, it is much harder to regulate and to deal with the bad stuff that comes out of Backpage. The GBI, on average, probably makes about 6 arrests a month. So they're one of my clients, the GBI, straight from Backpage, being able to look at their posts, determine where kids are being sold for sex. When you see things such as fresh or tender, young, That generally is the code words for under 18. No one says 16-year-old for sale. So you use the names to get that message apparently across. So it's very much a national problem, just not a foreign problem. And I immediately started working with numerous nonprofits in the state because the only way you make major accomplishment in the legislature is feet on the ground. Now, I will suggest to you it doesn't take as many feet on the ground as you may think. The typical legislator, if they get 20 emails on a topic, it's a lot. But there's a lobby day every year. I want to say this year it may be February 12th at the legislature, where all the nonprofit groups are seeking to get together to help push the legislation of this year, which we're naturally a part of. When I was first elected November 10th, so we had legislation we wrote, in essence, House Bill 200, which took us from having fair laws to having some of the best laws in the state. When I first took office, minimum mandatory was 1 year for sex trafficking. It's now 10. You can get, when it involves a minor, 25 to 50-year life for trafficking now, which is what it should be at that point. And I'll cover some more of those changes. But as we were working on the law and we passed it in the House, there was an incident right near here that really helped us pass it in the Senate. The Senate was going to be the harder body to pass the bill. And there was an incident at Eastman, and of course, unlike if I'm in Atlanta or Ellijay or Savannah, y'all know where Dodge County is. So there was an incident here in Eastman where a family was selling their 14-year-old daughter for sex and photos each month in lieu of making a $281 a month minivan payment. $281. The used car lot manager was 66, so it was a 66-year-old guy each month with a 14-year-old girl. Mom got 8 years, dad got 10, used car lot dealer got 10. Wholly inappropriate. Now, once again, it could be life when you go to take that case. Some important things that we were able to get in House Bill 200. The age of consent is 16 for sex in our state. Some states it's 14, 15, 16. So we're on the better side of that in general. It's not 18. But we made it clear for purposes of sex trafficking that under 18 is sex trafficking, not 16 in that regard. Additionally, if you claim you didn't know that the girl was under 18, she looked older than she was, nice try doesn't work in the courtroom. It's your burden, call it strict liability. If the girl allegedly looked 18 to you, but she wasn't, your problem, not mine, not the prosecutors. And the last step we made in that regard, overtly due to what happened in Eastman, is blood relation is not a defense. So if mom or dad are selling child, they get the same sentence. There's no gimme for parents. Yes, there should not be. And most importantly, in House Bill 200, the same jail time would relate to the buyer as the seller. So I don't use terms such as John and pimp. I use the term trafficker. When you're dealing with a minor, John and pimp are too nice a term. When you're dealing with a minor, the fact that many cops in these prostitution cases will tell the buyer, run, or go to court, we'll handle it as a misdemeanor and you pay $100, absolutely should not happen in trafficking. When Johnny's next door neighbor gets a jail sentence and it gets around the neighborhood that dad's in state prison because he bought a 16 or a 14 or a 12-year-old girl, that's called deterrence. Because you can't stop demand without fear. I mean, that's just a fact of life. You'd like it to be different, but it takes fear to do that. So with this new law, we have been able to assist several prosecutors, several DAs, to get a minimum of 5 years for buying an underage child. Very, very different than what happened before. And that's huge. So you may see billboards now, Georgia's not buying it. You may, if you go to Hartsfield Jackson, we have a PSA that I'll show you here. We just need to update it for obvious reasons that you'll see. Of the 4 pro athletes, one's still in Atlanta, so we got to update it. Who knew that they'd all be gone in a year? Thank good Harry Douglas is still on the Falcons. State parks. We worked with Christine where it's in this area, the signage, etc. We're actually working with Joel Babbitt now. We hope to come forward with that in about 2 or 3 years. Joel Babbitt, years ago, was the #1 marketing public relations guru in the Southeast. So we went up to him and we said, so we have these signs that says things like, she looked 18, Georgia's not buying it. That's introductory education. Now we need to deal with the fear. So the new billboards, the new signage is going to be much more in your face and remind you more of the advertisements you saw with the meth project. So for instance, it might have a picture of a guy in an old jail cell that says if you buy a minor for sex, you'll spend a lot of time here or the rest of your life. Because we're, once again, trying to cause fear. Because unfortunately, it takes that. So there were 2 prosecutors in the state that were handling the majority of this work. Now I realize I'm in Macon and I realize the Bibb County DA has been involved in this area. But for sheer numbers, which isn't something to be proud of, but from sheer numbers, the majority of the cases were being handled in DeKalb and Fulton. There are cases in Bibb, there are cases in Chatham, there are cases elsewhere, but sheer numbers, those 2 jurisdictions were doing the most of it. And the more you train law enforcement, the greater the numbers become because they get to understand the process more. So the lady who headed the unit in Fulton County, we hired in November, Kamala Wright. And that was really important because unlike the Bibb County DA's office or the Cobb County DA's office or the Dodge County DA's office, if they're in my office, they have statewide jurisdiction. So we can help the GBI and we can help a local DA. We can help anyone and everyone throughout the state to bring these cases, and we're doing it. We're doing training through the GBI. We're doing training with DNR for the state parks. We're doing training with the hoteliers, the taxi cab drivers, anyone and everyone that wants training. So after we passed House Bill 200, after it provided for training, there was an incident, once again, not too far from here, but not close to here, in Tolliver County. A Greene County sheriff followed a car into Tolliver, guy driving, lady in the back seat, didn't smell right to him. He had recently I don't know what I did, but recently done the training, and he called for GBI, State Patrol backup. 2 different entities, of course. And it ended up that the girl was 17. She had been trafficked since she was 12. She's originally from Birmingham, Alabama. And Georgia was her 4th state to be trafficked in. It was handled by the feds, in this case, and it was very, very successful, and the training works. So, you know, I'm very much someone who's of the opinion that you can't save every starfish, but any starfish you save is a really good day. And then we'll get back to that. So one of the first things with training or education is not just to educate you, it's to educate law enforcement. Because they need to understand that when they see the young girl or the young boy, that they are a victim and not a prostitute. They need to understand that there's no such thing as a 12-year-old girl looking to be a prostitute. So the way that you treat the victim has a lot to do with what will happen thereafter in the prosecution. It will also have a lot to do with whether you can save the girl or the boy. Because if you treat them as a defendant, they're going to arch their back and you're going to have a really hard time trying to get them out of this horror that they're now in. If you send them to DFACS, they run away. So you've got to be very careful. So we have a program in the state called Georgia Cares, and we have numerous places to include Wellspring Living and a couple other places that the GBI, the police will call, and then they will have the girl get immediate counseling assistance. So if the Macon Bib police, God, what are they called now? Macon. If the local police, if there's a place, I'm sorry? Bibb County Sheriff's Office. If there's a place here that will take the children and help them, so be it. If not, you go through Georgia Cares to provide that assistance. And it's not just for prosecution, it's literally to get them to have a positive life thereafter, as you saw in the film. So very, very important. So we started a program. I'll show you the PSA that I've already told you is, okay, I have no clue what I'm doing here now. What happened to what I was doing before?
Fix it.
Don't let a lawyer near technology.
What in the world? Let's see. Can you talk a little bit while I do that?
Oh, can I talk? You don't want me to sing. So the scenario is in large part to train. So here, I figured out the next 2 minutes. It's okay. So you would remember a couple years ago we had the Final Four, basketball. Wherever you have a Super Bowl, wherever you have a Final Four, wherever you have a big, all-star baseball game, an all-star basketball game, you've got all those guys showing up in town. You've got the out-of-state women/girls showing up too. So what we did is we worked below the radar with the FBI, the GBI, the State Patrol, APD, Clayton County, etc., so that the hoteliers, the taxi drivers, etc., would know what to look for. We don't want them to accuse the guy or the lady of having these girls for sex. We want the call going to the cops and for them to immediately deal with. And we had a whole bunch of arrests. The same thing happens every April with this thing you probably know about called the Masters. And what's important is the more you do it and the more successful you do it, the less apt they are to come to your city. Because if they think there's a good shot they're going to be arrested and they can actually be given life, they may choose to go to another state instead of your state with this program. Before this happens to me again, let me start it.
It's more real than you know.
It's happening all around us, and Georgia is no exception.
The youngest, most trusted members of our state
are falling victim to sexual exploitation and trafficking.
It's time that criminals who purchase sex from children know that the secret is out.
And Georgia's not going to stand for it.
It just takes ordinary people being informed,
standing up,
and making a statement.
And you tell me you didn't know.
We're not buying it.
Georgia's not buying it. For more information on how you can make a difference, go to ganotbuyingit.org.
Now you can go to ganotbuyingit.org, or you can simply shorten it to notbuyingit.org. And it has a lot of information about sex trafficking. Our program, the billboards, the signage, etc., and the PSA have overtly and voluntarily been copied by Arizona and New Jersey for their Super Bowl. And what the community did, they took the Georgia program. In fact, if you look up on the internet about Arizona and not buying it, it is the exact same thing you saw, except they have Arizona athletes to do it. And we overtly said, steal our idea. This isn't about ownership, this is about saving kids. So feel free to do it. So we're going to update it, we're going to keep improving it, but it's always nice flattery, it's nice when people use your idea. Recently, in the NFL, I'm sure y'all are familiar with the domestic violence issue. So let me suggest to you that there's little difference between a guy slapping his wife or his girlfriend and the guy buying a 14-year-old girl. Now, I know that's going to get me in trouble in a snippet, but the point is it's showing a disregard for the value of either the child or the woman. That's the commonality. So it is just as inappropriate, illegal, etc., to beat up an adult as it is to beat up the child. I may be of the opinion that when you beat up the child, there's more years in jail, which I am, but it doesn't make the one any less right than the other. They're both wrong. So as we're dealing with this situation, we need to understand what we're doing in the society that feeds this issue, remembering once again what I talked to, the fact that you can't stop demand except from fear. So let me give you an example of where I'm coming from. When I see a commercial for Twin Peaks or Coors or Hooters, the pictures are not about wings. It is devaluing the worth of a woman / child. So when we see those commercials and we got our 14-year-old son next to us watching tomorrow's football games, and the son goes, boy, that girl's got a great body, you are teaching your son the wrong lesson. If you don't immediately sit there and say, son, we need to have a little talk about this issue, and this is an important third down, but we are having an important talk about this issue. Because you've got to link the problem together. It is just as inappropriate for your son to think it's cute when he sees the Twin Peaks commercial or the Coors commercial as it is to be buying underage kids for sex. They are both totally wrong. And one of the things we have on the Not Buying It page is a pledge, which we ask guys to sign. Because it isn't macho to go to Cafe Erotica. It's not macho to go to the sleazy Asian massage parlor outside Macon. And we as guys need to make the point so that other men and our children understand how wrong it is, or else once again you don't have the ability to stop the problem, because we're mentors for our community, meaning men, not meaning anything more than that. So we have got to have the guts. So the NFL now has these commercials, like I think it's nomore.org, and you have these guys talking. It's great that it's occurring now. It would have been great if it was occurring a decade ago, or more great if it was occurring a decade ago. So we've got to get the point across. Recently, we started a program where we ask cities and counties to be certified. We call it Not Buying It certification, and you could find that on the website too. And the first city that sought it was a new city in DeKalb County, Brookhaven. And what that requires is that the elected officials and the employees of the city, and in particular law enforcement, go through training to understand the signs of sex trafficking, to understand that the child is a victim and not a defendant, so that when they see it in their community, they know better how to handle it. Because this does require not only education from the public, once again, but massive training by law enforcement. You know, if you go to a hotel and you see a guy and maybe a girl and 6 really young girls with high heels and a lot of makeup following them like the mother duck and the ducklings, that's probably not to see the Broadway show that's in town. So the point is to immediately alert the hotel folks, you know, to make sure that the call is made to the folks that can come and check it out, that go to the front desk. What room were those people headed to? It's really important to give law enforcement all the tools. So we have come a long way. We have passed numerous laws since then. I know you all are very familiar with the law that relates to adult establishments, you know, having the phone number and having the signage. We're looking at some more changes this year. So we've come a long way, but we still have a long way to go. I mean, we generally don't go more than about 2 to 3 weeks without knowledge of a new arrest or indictment in this area. So while there are many people in denial and who don't believe it exists in our community, it does. It absolutely does. But if you don't have the education and the training and you simply call it prostitution rather than trafficking, not only are you doing a disservice to the child, you're doing a disservice to your community, because often the years in jail are significantly different, and often the buyer isn't punished. And that's the big issue that we're really working on a lot, is demand, is punishing the buyer. Nothing scares folks more than the threat that their neighbor goes to jail for something that they didn't think you go to jail for. Having said that, I'm happy to take any questions or comments. If they're hard, I'll give them to Christine. If they're good, I'll be happy to take them. Questions or comments? Yes, sir.
Who's paying for all this training in the police departments? Who mandates it, or who initiates it?
Okay, so if we would have made it mandatory, the bill wouldn't have passed. So it is voluntary. But we are seeing more and more police departments agreeing to do it, and the GBI and the training academies are offering a lot of courses in that regard as the standard training. My prosecutor goes around wherever she's asked, whether it's the DNR, GBI, etc. Now, when I say GBI, a lot of times the GBI is sponsoring the program. It's in their budget, and she comes with them. So, for instance, we had a program actually at Mercer's campus in Atlanta earlier this week where my prosecutor, GBI, and FBI were all on a panel teaching law enforcement what to look for, etc. So our time, GBI, FBI, my office, and all, it's free. We don't charge anyone. We want it to occur. And it's a function of just simply making the call. So we deal a lot with Brian Johnston at the GBI. And Kamala Wright's the prosecutor in my office. I'm not going to mention the gentleman from the FBI because he might not want his name so publicly known. That was my hesitation there for a second. But you make the call, the GBI or us or whatever, and we set it up. There's no cost. This is an area we're not looking for someone to write a check. We're looking for them to give us their time to be able to educate the individuals that need to be educated. So, for instance, I already know we're working to do training in Savannah. They haven't had any training yet. So we're looking to do it where it hasn't occurred previously. Now, the good thing, once again, is in Macon, where we are, of course, today, both your DA, David Cook, has been very active in this space, as has Michael Moore, your U.S. attorney. So here you actually have both state and federal prosecutors that are engaged. So that's good. I can't say that throughout the state. There are areas where there are lapses. You're not in one of those areas, thankfully. Yes, sir.
You mentioned that there weren't that many cases of labor trafficking in Georgia.
Right.
And I was wondering if that was because of its relative invisibility and its perhaps more difficult nature in order to expose to light. I talked to some folks up in Atlanta working for some anti-trafficking organizations, and they said that it's a wider spread problem than we think, and that oftentimes you have agricultural trafficking, not just migrant labor, but trafficking, and situations sometimes where you have women trafficked in for the entertainment of these trafficked men working on these.
Yeah, but then that's sex trafficking.
Right. I know that part.
Where we see it more, and I apologize, is illegal Hispanic immigrants, etc., where they're abused in the household, similar to what you saw in the film with the lady from Tanzania.
So you don't see it out in the fields, though?
No, we frankly are not getting reports, or many reports at all in that regard. I'm not denying that it exists. I'm just saying we're not seeing those reports. There was a, yes ma'am.
Yes. Is there a spin-off of your training module that can be used for prevention, let's say in middle schools, so you're educating young children about what could happen?
So a year ago, it was made as part of the potential training for school teachers. So several of us did little videos to encourage school teachers to take the training. I did one of those little videos in that regard. And that is a function of going up to your principals and going up to your superintendents and asking them to make it a part of the training.
And is that the name the same?
Well, sex trafficking, human trafficking, whatever term you want to use, but it is part of the training available to teachers, but is a voluntary rather than a mandatory training. So it's literally up to that individual superintendent or school principal to strongly encourage that that occur in that school. So some teachers are getting it and some teachers aren't. And we're going to go up to the brand new state superintendent, Richard Woods, to see if he can use his bully pulpit to push it a little bit more. But frankly, the last state school superintendent was very supportive of it too, John Barge. So it really comes down to the local level and whether it's important, seen as important training by the local school board members and superintendent. Yes, ma'am.
You talk about fear being a deterrence.
Right.
Why? Or is it not available for the men that buy these children to have their pictures put in the newspaper?
Actually, that is available.
Is it being done?
It's generally not done, but it's available because you could do the lesser charges and that could come in under the lesser charges. To be honest, and we've had those discussions in my office, and I would say there is a disagreement in my office in that regard. The thought process by the majority of the prosecutors in my office is that the fear of spending 5+ years in jail is actually more valuable than the photo in the newspaper. Because we all know how many people nowadays get the newspaper and how many people go past the first page of the newspaper. So as you're looking to see where to spend your capital to change legislation or to push for certain changes, it's really been felt that pushing for the years of the state prison is a better use of that time. But it can occur under the lesser charges that are available, but the lesser charges have lesser time in jail. And we're really trying to make the point more that this is a really serious crime, and when a guy buys a 12-year-old girl, that's something that, I mean, from my perspective, I think they should spend more than 5 years. I will tell you that we've been able to get judges generally to go up to 5 years. So you do the best you can at a given point to move the ball in the right direction.
But if it's law that they're going to spend 5 to 1
right.
or whatever, if that's already law, I just think the embarrassment for some of these men would be
that's possible. Keep in mind they're also on the sex offender registry, which causes a whole bunch of issues in addition at that point too. I'm not there to disagree with you.
I'm just asking, what can we do to get these men to stop it?
I'm suggesting to you that while I don't disagree with your concern about the photo, the 5+ years in jail has probably more ability to do that. I mean, it's not like it's a DUI and they're gone from the house for 3 months on a second or third DUI. You know, all of a sudden when dad's gone 5 years, that sends a good message. And let's face it, justice in the 70s, it was okay to go to a 3-to-1 happy hour. And if you got a DUI, you know, you had a good lawyer, the case was dismissed. Maybe you got a reckless conduct. I really think we got to make the message that when you buy a child, it's jail. And a lot of jail. So that's really where we've been spending the majority of our time. I don't think the photo, candidly, is as important. I'm not going to deny that I think it should be part of the process. And it's not that I'm making any comments about the individual that's been given the +5 years. I think it has a bigger impact on everyone he knows. Because all of a sudden at the place of employment, at the church or synagogue, anywhere, the Rotary Club, it catches wind pretty good that Johnson stayed prison for 5 years.
Yeah.
And I think that's really what we need to see happen a lot more. Yes, ma'am.
On the same line that this lady was talking about, and what you said earlier about doing new promos,
Right.
could it be possible, is there a law against, or whatever, that you could scroll people who were actually, pictures of people who were actually in jail for the crime with that promo?
Yeah, my only limitation's money.
Well, I mean, yeah, but.
And I'm not being flippant with you. I mean,
I know.
that's a financial issue.
But you're doing the promo anyway.
But
right?
you know, there's only so many people that see the PSA.
Yeah.
If I actually had ads on TV, then a lot more people would see them. If I had more billboards, many more people would see them, and that all takes real money versus here I'm bringing to you what's on our notbuyingit.org site.
Yeah. But still, when you do whatever you do, is there a possibility of scrolling actual people who are convicted of this crime?
In the future, there are. When I made this PSA, there were no people that got a minimum of 5 years.
Right. That's
Now there are. Now I've got the ability to do what I could not do before.
Because facial recognition within communities of whomever may see the PSA
Yeah, absolutely.
would also do what she's trying.
Now, understood. Understood.
Just
I just am suggesting to you, look, I'm one of the people in my office that think the photo should be in the paper. But I also agree with my office that the more folks we can have serve a minimum of 5 years for buying a child, sends probably a greater societal effect. Yes, sir.
And that's true. The problem I think we have is, like you were talking about denial. It's fine that the neighbor knows that dad is gone for 5 years, but the rest of the city don't. When we had the brain on drugs, I think that was in the 80s, who was in control of that? Like, why isn't the same people putting the amount of money or the amount of attention in what's going on with our kids and our women as we did in the fried egg and the skillet? You know what I mean? I guess that's our problem. I work for the Bibb County Sheriff's Office. I'm an investigator. And we are taught, we don't even charge people with pimping anymore. It's just human trafficking and just,
Which is great, but you're not the norm.
Exactly.
I wish there were more like what's occurring here. Now, I mean, I totally agree. And that's why I overtly link it to the domestic violence with the NFL, because too few people make the connection, and there's a connection. You know, I read something last night where a state recently changed their law to permit TROs, temporary restraining orders, from a camera hookup in an emergency room in a state where the judge can issue the TRO, because as you know, and as you're a deputy sheriff in the back? Yes, sir. My eyesight's not that great anymore. Thank you. The sooner to the occurrence and the treatment you can get the woman to press the charges, the better likelihood you have that we can then get the TRO originally, et cetera, to deal with it. So timing's really important. I'll give you an example that may not be a good example. In the 70s, people started talking about breast cancer. It's not that breast cancer started in the 70s. It was that people wouldn't use the word breast with cancer before then. So you would say, my girlfriend, my wife has cancer. You didn't say she has breast cancer. Nowadays, if your girlfriend, your wife has breast cancer, you say breast cancer just as you say colon cancer, stomach cancer, rectal cancer, etc. But for years we didn't say it, because God forbid if you mention the two words together. For years we haven't been willing to say the words sex trafficking. So when you ask me why we were doing it before, you know, your kid's brain is like the fried egg, I can't give you a good answer because I don't think there is one. All we can do is move forward and push it as much as we can and have as many programs like this as possible, whether it's through PTAs, PTSAs, et cetera, programs with the DA's office, the sheriff's office, et cetera. When we did the program before the Final Four to Atlanta, we had a program with Central Atlanta Progress, which is, they call themselves ambassadors in downtown Atlanta. And as we were training, they're ambassadors and they have a uniform and people recognize them on the street as being part of Central Atlanta Progress, the business community downtown pays for them. One of the ambassadors said, there's a guy who's always in Woodruff Park, which is right in the heart of downtown Atlanta, calling over some really cute little kids for pictures and giving them a card that he's with a talent agency or modeling. He said, I'm thinking he may not be with a talent or modeling agency after this presentation. Another person said, there's a guy doing the same thing at Woodruff Library, which is also downtown. I'm concerned that he's not in the talent or modeling agency. The more education we get out in the public, the more training we do with law enforcement and quasi-law enforcement, the more successful we're going to be in this area. But we have to get rid of the mores and have to get into the issue, because no one wants to deal that your community has kids as young as 12 or so being sold for sex. But they are. And it's really important that we have the guts and the determination to face it head on and to make the difference. So a great question, poor answer, but we can only move forward as much as we can. She's coming to give me the hook. I catch that at times.
He's easy to do that too.
So it's my pleasure to be with you all. God bless you for all you're doing, and thank you very much. Okay. You have the mic. Oh. That's the only reason I came to make it.
I know. So thank you.
Thank
Go
you.
this way, though.
Yeah, I see
that's a
no
long
steps
drop.
there. Okay, yeah.
So thank you so much. I know we could listen to him and hear him answer questions for a lot longer, and I so appreciate him making this trip on this holiday weekend on his day off. And we want to hear now from Alia El-Sawi. She has with her also a survivor of child sex trafficking. She's going to introduce and tell more about that. And I'm not going to give her a whole bio, although I want to. I read it last night, and I'm like, wow, she is such a champion. She's my hero. So I should probably make copies. Y'all can email me, have an address somewhere, and I'll send you her tremendous, just all the great things she's done for human trafficking and child sex trafficking. But if you'll go ahead and make your way up, Alia, I will tell you that she currently serves as the Victim Assistance Specialist for Immigration and Customs Enforcement's Homeland Security Investigations. And her area of responsibility includes all of Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina. And in this capacity, she designs and provides educational trainings and outreach to law enforcement, attorneys, mainstream service providers, community-based organizations on human trafficking and child exploitation. I do want to jump down and point out that she was also with another organization called Tapestry, very well known to those of us who do things in this area, and has just lots of great things. So she's going to be terrific to listen to and to share information about what's going on. Do you want to use this, or do you want to mic? This is fine. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm so happy to be here because I'm actually a Mercer alum, and thank you. And I'm always excited to come back, to Mercer and talk about human trafficking, talk about, what's going on, what we're seeing in our neighborhoods and various communities, because I think it is very important to recognize that this isn't an issue that just happens overseas. It's not an issue that's just Atlanta-based. It's happening right here in Macon. It's happening in the Middle District. But I don't want to spend too much time on myself. I want to be mindful of y'all's time, and I want to be mindful of Cecilia's time because she has to get back to Atlanta. So just very briefly about me, I cover the state of Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and as stated, I worked for Tapestry for about 5 years, 5.5 years, and now with the federal government for about 5 years. So I've been doing trafficking work for about 10.5 years now, and it's hard to believe. Straight out of Mercer, actually. But I think you heard a little bit before about what kind of issues we're seeing here. And although that was a little bit more focused on the domestic trafficking, my office actually investigates cases that are domestic, meaning U.S. citizens that have been victimized, as well as foreign nationals, whether they have status here in the United States or whether they're here and they're undocumented. We investigate cases involving adults, juveniles, men, women, labor trafficking, and sex trafficking. And not to call out Dr. Andrew Silver, but he asked about labor trafficking and how prevalent is it here in Georgia. And I can assure you that my office is investigating a lot of these cases, whether it's migrant farm workers, domestic servitude. We've had recent cases where women from the Hispanic community have been dancing at cantinas. They're traditional Latin dances, $5 dances, not necessarily sexual in nature, although it can turn to be sexual. But we investigate those as labor because all the money that they're collecting is being handed over to their trafficker. And the same type of manipulation and coercion that you see, documents being taken away, threats of deportation, threats towards their family members, a lot of the things that we see with the domestic cases, we see with the foreign nationals as well. I'm going to kind of tie in my presentation with Cecilia's. I do want to introduce her. I've known Cecilia now for, let's see, 4 years, I would say. And I've come up with a few questions for her. This is actually her first time presenting in front of a big audience. And I cannot emphasize this young lady, how intelligent, how much of a beautiful personality she has. She is extremely kind-hearted. And actually, let me briefly say this. If there is any media here, when I call her up, if we could just turn off the cameras, just to be mindful, and I ask that no pictures be taken, please. Just because she's going to share some of her personal story. But Cecilia is here today actually with her fiance and her little baby boy, Caleb. And he's going to hate me for doing this, but the case agent, Special Agent Tony Ruffle, came to support Cecilia here today because we all kind of built a bond throughout the past 4 years from the moment that we met Cecilia, put her in touch with social service providers, found her housing, and of course, Special Agent Ruffle did all the investigation and prosecuted the case so well. And I have to say this, I've worked with a lot of agents, and I'm happy to say that a lot of the agents I work with in my office are very compassionate, but this gentleman just put everything into this investigation, and you could just tell that he wanted to bring justice to Cecilia as much as I did. So I did want to just say that. So Cecilia, are you ready to come up? And I'm sorry for the informal nature of my presentation, but I think that, just given the fact that we have Cecilia here today, I think that this is the best way to do it. So I've got some questions for you, and we'll just go back and forth like we talked about, okay? Okay. So Cecilia, will you tell us a little bit about your background, how life was back in Sierra Leone, and how you came here to the United States?
Hello. My name is Cecilia. I came from Sierra Leone when I was 11. When I was back home, I came as a refugee status because of the war in my country. I could say we didn't have much at all. So it was very, very hard for us back home. So when I came here at 11, It was a different place for me. This was definitely very, very different. And the surrounding, I mean, it was different in a good way and in a strange way because of the support. So.
And actually talking about the support, or should I say lack thereof, can you tell us a little bit about once you came here to the United States and explain your living situation with your grandmother and your aunt and kind of the dynamics between you and your family and some of the struggles?
Well, my grandma brought 11 of us here, and I guess her thoughts was a lot of the family members would come and get a job and pay the bills with her, but that didn't work out. Everybody comes to America, they learn, they're like, okay, we're out of here. So that brought a lot of hatred with my grandma, and I was the only one that didn't call my parents, so I had to stay with her. And I can say she took a lot of her anger off me with the people. She said they played her ungrateful, that I'm going to do the same thing to her. So it came to the point where sometimes, they would leave the house with me in the house with no food to eat. And I would have to go to the people from my country just to stay a little closer with to the family. And I would have to go to their house, probably help them cook or do stuff around the house so I can have something to eat or, to just be around people that will make me feel like an outcast, because it was very strange for me. Even though we didn't have much in my mom's side of the family in Africa, I still had that family oriented. So I lacked a lot of that when I came here. And my grandma, she would call me names. We didn't get along at all. And she would tell me all the time, because those people played ungrateful. She feel like I would play ungrateful, or maybe we didn't understand each other at all. And, after that, I was staying with different family members because I didn't feel like she was to the point where she could take care of me, her or my aunt. And when I was staying with the people, they would still call the people and just, talk mess about me to the point where the people are like, you know what, we don't want no problem with your grandma. You know what I'm saying? Because in the African community, people talk. We got to watch out for our own image. So just go back there, and I go there and just get from hell to hell to hell. And that's how I ended up running away from my grandma. I came back. Of course, they don't believe the adults over the child. And there was an occasion when they was pushing me. There was, I don't even know what kind of name they haven't called me. But it's really bad when you don't get support from your family. And you feel like if they don't care, then who should care? And when the outside people try to care, your family go and talk more crap about you. So they feel like, why would her family say this about them? But they don't know, the inside of the story, and they just outside looking in. So it's a very terrible thing.
And just to kind of help Cecilia out, basically with living with her grandmother and with her aunt, there was a lot going on within the household, a lot of family violence that was occurring, a lot of mistreatment. I actually ended up going to court with Cecilia in Clayton County and had her deprived from her family because it was just horrible, horrible living situations. So you hear all these stories about child victims, because Cecilia at the time of her trafficking incident was actually a minor. She was 17 or 16 at the time when we encountered her, but she was running away from home. She was getting kicked out from home, and as a result of that, unfortunately, there was an occasion where she got taken advantage of by a neighbor. So there were all sorts of issues that were occurring within the household, which kind of leads me to my next question. The main target of this case went by the name Silk, and he had female that was, I guess you could say, his accomplice. She was known as one of the recruiters, known as a bottom, or what we, this is the term that I coined, but also known as being his bottom bitch, the one that would go out and recruit the girls, befriend them, and then they both ended up making her do things that she did not want to do. So, Cecilia, could you explain to us a little bit about what Silk and Tiara made you do? I know it's difficult, so take your time with that.
Well, first when I got into Tiara and Silk, it was all about school. That's what I told them, that I was in the process of school. But they helped me out stay for at their house for a while until it was time for me to get into school. They agreed to that. But I guess the more they saw that nobody gave a crap about me, and they felt like as though my school wasn't coming any sooner, then that's when everything started. They told me that was the only way I could stay with them. If I, they was like, you don't see us working, how else do you think money comes in? I was just like, I don't know, like, I don't know, I'm not digging in all of you guys' business. But they would just post me up on Backpage and put my information in, and Tiara would pretend to be me as far as like talking on the phone when she get calls, because after a while I just wasn't answering no calls. I was just, ignoring the calls, and they're like, why you didn't get no calls? I was like, I don't know, my phone didn't ring. So they started putting in their number, and she would receive the call, talk to them, pretending to be me, and then she would just, let them know, look, this is where, and she would let me know, if it was a price range or whatever I need to do. I have to hand them everything, and
So, Silk and Tiara knew about Cecilia's background. They knew the vulnerabilities that existed. They knew that she had already been traumatized, not only back in Sierra Leone, having going through what refugees have to go through to come and seek refuge, but also dealing with her grandmother and her aunt. And at this point, when she had run away, that's when they encountered her. And as I mentioned, Tiara approached her, befriended her, and saw that Cecilia had gotten kicked out of her house, and that's when she offered Cecilia to stay with them. And unfortunately, they started forcing her into prostitution as a minor. And I know that you probably could explain a little bit better than I can in terms of why didn't you just leave? Did you feel like you had a choice? Because a lot of people ask that, why did you stay in your situation? Why couldn't you just walk out? Do you mind explaining that?
Well, I really wish that I had that place to run to. I guess I was just tired of my family and all the negativity, and at the point I didn't have nowhere to stay because my grandma already left and she moved back to Africa. She didn't even know where I was staying, and she honestly would tell me in my face she didn't care, and she had moved to Africa. And my family members that I was staying in, they don't call her an auntie, call and basically talk a whole bunch of crap, and some of them, they will probably want my grandma to tell them it was okay, just because that's how the African community is. They care a lot about what each other have to say. So just the fact that, staying with them is, I just couldn't go back because I feel like as though things was just gonna get worse to the point where I feel like I would probably have to take my own life, because I didn't feel like, my family gave me any type of support. And when I look around and I see the other girls getting a little support from their family, it really hurt my feelings. I just want my family to keep on me a little bit. To care about me a little bit. Like I want someone to care about me. And I'm watching around it. All my cousins that are around me, they're doing a lot more. And I'm just the one there that don't have no one to really defend me. And I just wanted my family to show me that, you know, you can come to us, you can talk to us. We're here for you, instead of always telling me you're going to be dead in the street, you're going to be in the gutter, we don't give a damn what happened to you, we don't do this. I just felt like things couldn't get any worse, and I have attempted to, you know, end my own life at several times. But my mom is in Africa. I didn't feel like as though she, at the end of the day, I feel like she really wants to suffer that. If people don't care, I don't feel like there's any point of you even taking your life, because it would be on you and the one that don't care, which is my mom. And she didn't know none of this going on, and I didn't explain anything to her. But that's why I feel like I didn't have no reason to go back, because I feel like it was just going to get worse, to the point when a stranger do it to you, it's bad. But when your family member, you know, just mentally abusing you, telling you all type of negative things. And I had an uncle that when I was staying with one of them, he, you know, tried to touch me and stuff, but I couldn't say nothing to the family because they wasn't going to believe me, either way it goes. So I just kept going, and I just took it in, and I knew that, you know, God had a better plan for me, as long as I just keep it moving and have faith.
So you already shared with us a little bit all of the trauma that you went through with this animal. I think that we can all agree that there's no other way to put it. But how do you think that this has affected your life? And what would you, if you had one message to give, or you know, anything that you want to share with the audience about what we can look for, how can we help when it comes to trying to assist people that have been in unfortunate situations like yours?
I would just say, you know, sometimes it's just good to know the people around you. You cannot assume because they were family, they're happy, or everything is good, or even if you see a new person around and you haven't been seeing them, you know, even if it's a couple, those are the ones that are even worse, the couples, because they're very manipulated. You're not going to expect a couple to do anything like that. So if you see a strange girl around, you know, introduce yourself. They're most likely going to be scared to introduce themselves because they don't know your relationship with the person. So if you introduce yourself and you talk to them, if you get to that level, when it gets really bad, you know, they can probably run to you and talk to someone. But in the situation where we don't really trust nobody to talk to, because it starts from home, you know, and then it comes all the way down. So it's like we can't trust our family, we don't have no friends. We meet these people here, so we don't know whether they know them or not. And it's just good to talk to people. You know, you will know when something is wrong with someone. Even though they would try to hide it, you will know when something is wrong with a specific person. And I just, you know, wish that someone would have stopped me and be like, you know, you okay, you good? You know, you need help, come to me. I just wish I had those words come out of anybody, but I didn't. So even when I got arrested, I was even scared to talk to the detective because, you know, some of the girls that I got arrested with told me they're familiar with one of the detectives, and not in a friendly police way, in the other way. So I'm just like, this girl says she's been doing this for 15 years. I don't know if she's familiar with him too. And he probably gets scared trying to cover himself, and he'll throw me on the bus. So I'm just like, I'm not going to talk to nobody until I get out and I'll find who I feel comfortable to talk with. And that's what I did. But as far as helping, sometimes you can't help anybody, but there's some of us out there that really appreciate some help and who really can use the help. You know, sometimes we act like we don't want it because we're scared, because we don't know, you know, if you're coming again as the helper to take us back where we just came from. We don't know what we're coming to. But, you know, I was willing to go to call the police, and, you know, I called Alia and them, and I reported myself. I was just like, look, I'm in this situation. I'm trying to go to school. I'm trying to do something for myself. I was just like, it's very hard for me because I'm tired of bouncing from one place to another. I need somewhere to stay, you know, and I explained. I did a lot of calls that night. I didn't tell much of it until this lady that felt like she showed some concern. You know, she didn't tell me, oh, okay, we don't have no home for you. She was just like, you okay? You know, you don't sound okay, sweetie, you can talk to me. And I was able to sit there and I talked to her and I told her the situation. And she listened, and so she sent Alia and Tony back there, and she sent them to me in the morning. And I was happy that I made that call to change my life, you know. So, and like I said, I knew God had a good reason to bring me here from the poor and brought me in a land that everybody knows opportunity. It just depends how it comes. And Tony and Alia picked me up that day. They took me to home, and they have been there for me since then. You know, even though my case is finished with, sometimes when I have questions, I call them. You know, I call them, I check on them. They call me, they check on me. So I'm just very grateful to have all this support out here, just to show it's not, you know, it's not about the money. It's just about that love, that caring, that, you know, I don't have much to give you, but I'll give you my love, I'll give you my support. And I'm just very grateful for their time and their dedication and for believing me and not looking at me as a suspect, even when I feel bad about myself. And, you know, it has been a great decision of my life. And now I have a strong relationship with them. I have my son and my fiance, and I'm in school, you know, I'm working. So I can say I have a lot going on for myself just because of that one help that I had that I've been looking for my family from the wrong places, and it ended me up at the right place. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cecilia, for sharing that story. As many times as I've heard it before, it still touches my heart, and I think Tony could probably say the same. The good news is the case was prosecuted back this past spring, and the main defendant, Silk, got 25 years, and we also were able to charge Tiara as well, and she was already doing time for something else, so we just had more time added on. Can't recall how many months total it was. 96. There you go. 96 months. Plus, as I mentioned, she's got a long way to go because she has some other charges that were pending prior to our charges. So I think that concludes our presentation. Thank you for bearing with us with this informal type of presentation, but I think that we can all agree that Cecilia is a very, very, very strong individual, and thank you so much for your time. Thank you, Cecilia.
Where's that microphone? Okay, is this the microphone? Okay, can you hear me? Okay, thank you. That was a tearjerker. I'm glad they kind of continued so I could get back up here. But this does conclude our program. I do want to thank CB&T Bank of Middle Georgia for sponsoring this event. We appreciate that so much. To Mercer for allowing us to use this venue. And then, of course, the MG Alert Board, Dale Rickert, Dee Sims, Dottie Stafford, Sister Elizabeth Grime, Dr. Andy Silver, LaTanya Lester, Ramona Mastrangelo. I just appreciate just everybody coming together to make this happen. We had all those location changes and just some sign stuff. There's a lot of stuff that went into it, and I just think it was worth coming together. And certainly to our speakers who traveled, they all traveled a great distance to be here today. And we appreciate so much the time that they did with that. I appreciate, I did whatever he did. I appreciate Tyler Campbell and his wife, my daughter Sam, for doing the photo booth. I think that's going to be a really neat way to raise awareness. I do want to end by saying if you haven't signed up for email alerts from us, please do so. If there's something in particular that you're interested in hearing about, please email me. Now that we've shown the film, the rights are that we can show them to small groups. So we may show this to one of our community meetings. We have those quarterly. So, please sign up to hear from us, to become engaged in what we're doing here. Some of the things that you can take away from here are, liking the Facebook page if you're on Facebook, otherwise getting the MG alerts, going to the website, and it will tell you when there are things that you, or times that you need to call your legislators. You don't even have to have a reason to call them. Your congressman, if you're in Houston County and parts of Bibb, your congressman is Austin Scott. We really need him on board. Congressman is Sanford Bishop. He always votes in favor of, but he needs to continue to hear from his constituents. We have a new senator, David Perdue, for Georgia, and Johnny Isaacson has been a friend to this. Saxby Chambliss, who went out, has been a friend in voting for these things, but we want to get David Perdue on board. So, use that phone call. It's really easy. Just, there doesn't have to be a bill out there. When you call, just call and say, I want you to do everything you can to stop human trafficking. I want Georgia to lead the nation in not raping our children for profit in this country. So I will end with that. And if you have any questions for me or for the board, if you want to ask those now, I could answer any of those. Okay, very good. Thank you all for coming. I appreciate it so much.